Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen. If you have been following along, you might have seen some of the videos where Julie and I went to Mexico City and we did a street food tour. And after eating a whole lot of pastor, it occurred to me that I've got a beer keg and I could turn that beer keg into a charcoal burning vertical rotisserie to make al pastor. So I'll link to those videos below. Came home, turned a beer keg into a vertical rotisserie, and I'll link to that video down below. But before I get into making tacos al pastor and shawarma and some of the more involved recipes, I thought I would do something homegrown Canadian. This is pure Canadiana immigrant experience food, and I mean that in the greatest way. I'm going to make a Halifax donair. So before I get into the history of the donair and what it's all about, let's just start by making it. So I have here ground beef. And this is sort of, if you live in Ontario, it's called medium ground beef. If you live in the United States, it's probably 80-20. You want a good mix of beef to fat, or a good beef to fat ratio. I'm going to put that into the stand mixer. Yes, I'm using a stand mixer. Wait for it. This is how it works. Into here, I'm going to put black pepper. This is really simple. Paprika, salt, cayenne, oregano, garlic powder, and onion powder. Now we want to emulsify this almost like a sausage. Well, no, completely like an emulsified sausage. And there's a few ways that you could do it. You could mix all the spices in with the ground beef and then just keep putting it through a grinder until it emulsifies. That would work fantastic. That's probably my preferred method to do this. Certainly that's the way that the factory in Halifax that makes this stuff commercially for a bunch of restaurants does it. But I'm going to use this stand mixer with a dough hook. This might take a little bit longer, but I think for ease of cleanup, this is the best method for me. Now, if you don't have a stand mixer or you don't have a stand mixer big enough, you could use a food processor, definitely, and just whiz it in the food processor for a little while until you get that nice emulsification. I switched to the paddle from the dough hook. I initially didn't want to use the paddle because I watched Matty Matheson make this a couple weeks ago, and he made a mess of his kitchen, but I guess his mixer wasn't as big as mine. So this is working out fairly well. So let's talk about Halifax donair. What is Halifax donair? Where did it come from? Where did it start? Who invented it? And just like every food story or recipe, the history is a little bit muddled. There are competing families who claim that they invented it and that they started it and they were the first. But generally, if you distill it down, the stories are basically the same. You've got a family that moved to Canada from Greece in the 1960s. They open a restaurant in Halifax. They're serving gyros. It doesn't go over very well with the locals. They don't like the spicing. They don't like the lamb. For whatever reason, it doesn't sell. So the chef goes back into the kitchen and says, what do these people want to eat? And he comes up with a mix that is 100% ground beef instead of lamb, takes out a lot of the Mediterranean spicing and adds in things that people in Halifax were more familiar with at that time, cooks it in exactly the same way, takes out the tzatziki sauce, that garlicky sort of yogurt sauce that I personally love, and instead they make this other sauce that I'll make later that is just sickly sweet and vinegary. Goes over really well. People love it, absolutely love it, and it's a hit. And it doesn't really travel much outside of Nova Scotia, out of Halifax and Nova Scotia, until probably the 1990s. But if you really want the proper Halifax donair, you have to go to Halifax. Okay, almost ready. So for those of you following along at home, yes, it is related to doner or doner or gyros or gyros, but it's flavored differently. It is uniquely Canadian, and I really like it, although you have to be drunk at like 2 in the morning to have one, I think. It's kind of like poutine. It really is an after the bar or after the club type meal. So now what I need to do is form the meat around the rotisserie so that we can cook it outside with the charcoal. And for those of you following along at home, yes, it's just barbecued meatloaf. And so Matty wasn't too far off when he did his in the oven. I've seen people do it in the oven like a regular meatloaf. I've also seen people take this meat and lay it flat out on a cookie sheet and form it into a very thin layer and then bake it. And that gives you a texture that is much closer to what you would get by cooking it on a vertical spit. And the flavor's a lot more roasty than cooking it in a loaf tin like you would a meatloaf. So I just want to form this on. This is the first time I'm doing this at home like this, so I don't know that I'm going to get the shape completely right, but I'm going to do my best, which is really all you can do. Okay, the shape is not great, but the meat is starting to warm up a little bit, so it's not holding its shape quite as nicely. I'm going to stick this in the fridge and let it chill down. I'll rework the shape a little bit after it's chilled a little bit more, and then I want to leave it in the fridge for probably 3 to 4 hours to let the whole thing come together and let all of the flavors mix nicely. In that time, we'll make the sauce and we will get the barbecue going. Okay, it's time to make the sauce. And I'm going to tell you, don't think about the sauce too much. Just enjoy it without thinking about the fact that it's evaporated milk, sugar, and vinegar. It just tastes great. It tastes great on the donair. So, evaporated milk. Now, some recipes don't do evaporated milk and sugar. They do condensed milk without the sugar because there's already sugar in condensed milk. And you can do that way for sure, definitely. So that's the sugar that goes in. This is garlic powder. And then we need some white vinegar, just plain white vinegar. And then we just pour this in and whisk at the same time. And as soon as you start pouring it in and whisking, it thickens right up. So just finish up, and then I'm going to stick this in the fridge and let it come together. It'll thicken up, and I'm going to put it in a squeeze bottle for service. I guess it's time to go out and start the barbecue. Okay, the fire's rolling. I just loaded it up with some extra charcoal so that as soon as I put the rotisserie on, I don't have to sort of reach in and add more charcoal. So I think it's time to get the meat and get going. Okay, can I get this in there? First time. There we go. Woo, we are on. Okay, so we're cooking pretty well right now. I'm gonna close these doors just a little bit to try to shape the heat around the donair as it cooks. Okay, it's time to take off the first few slices. Let's see if I can do this.
Yay! That smells pretty good, but I'm a little worried. I dip this?
Dip it and throw it
Like-
on. Yep, really quick. In and
I'm
out.
gonna move it closer.
Okay.
'Cause I feel like I'm gonna dribble everywhere.
So they steam the pita. It's the
Can you
first time.
It's like the first pancake, right? It's
Yep.
sacrificial.
Okay, so here's the sauce.
I feel like that one might be done already.
The cooker worked kind of the way I thought it might. Temperature-wise, I think it was a little bit difficult. I think my biggest problem was I didn't make the
I'm gonna try a different method. A little less.
I didn't make the loaf correctly. I don't think I emulsified the meat enough. And because I didn't emulsify the meat enough, I didn't get a good shape. And because I didn't get a good shape, it cooked unevenly and was difficult to cut. So all of these things are things that
Version 1.
version 1, I know next time I can do it better. Sauce, onions, and tomatoes. There you go, Jules.
Thank you.
Okay, sauce, meat. Yeah, I could have done better with the meat. Oh well. But it kind of looks like it's supposed to look like. If I could cut it thinner, I think I would be in a better shape.
Oh, again, that's a skill thing, right?
Yep.
It's like, oh,
Onion.
it's a boy.
This is not first date food at all.
No, I'm already making a mess.
Okay. And
Are you ready?
yep,
All right.
roll it up and away you go.
Okay, it is not pretty. It has all the right flavors, though. It is. I don't think I did a very good job with the bread, but
I think the pita I got is too thick. There is a much thinner style of pita that they use.
for next time. But it's got that sweet, oniony.
Yeah, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of spice, barbecue-y.
I'm in. I mean, Project One on our homemade device is pretty good. I can actually just pick out the pieces that fall out.
So it needs some refining.
Yes, but you know, that's okay.
Imagine coming out of a bar in Halifax in 1975 and seeing Stompin' Tom Connors chomping down on one of these after his show.
That would have been.
That would have been great.
I'm sure he would have invited you for one. All right. Well, I guess we're going to continue experimenting. Clearly, because we haven't stopped eating, it tastes great.
Okay, so I just need to cook it better. Cook it
But cooking it better starts with
with the
making
shape,
a better shape, which goes back to.
emulsifying it properly.
So there you go.
And but the keg works great.
Which is fabulous.
Couple
Because
of-
that just opens up all sorts of
Yeah.
doors.
A couple of little changes I'll make to it. I will drill holes in the bottom so that if fat drips into the bottom, it has some way to go. Escape.
Did you have some
No,
flare-ups?
we didn't catch fire, but there was a couple times I looked inside and thought, oh no, there's a little bit of grease in the bottom. I could be in trouble. It was fine though. Everybody was worried about the rotisserie motor being too hot. I took temperature readings all through the cook. It never reached even half of what it's rated for in terms of temperature.
Because you did purposely buy one that was.
That was
yeah.
for high temperatures, so it's completely fine where it is. So don't worry about it. And the other thing was the charcoal worked great. I was worried that I'd constantly be putting charcoal in. I fired it up, put in fresh charcoal just before I put the meat on. And then once in the middle, I put in a little bit more charcoal because I was worried, but I shouldn't have.
Yeah, because it's still really hot.
Because it is still really hot, and I noticed that after I put the next little bit of charcoal in, that it got too hot, and that's when I ran into trouble with it.
That's
little
the
char on the
But,
outside.
you know what? The irony, though, is that because of the sugars in what you put into the
Yeah,
meat,
yep.
it's that sweet
It's
char versus burnt
wonderful,
char. Does
yeah.
that make sense? Like
Yep.
that sugary.
So all in all, I think today's a win.
I'll take it as a win.
It's a win. So we're going to keep going on this. We're going to try all of the meats, but you know, it is the end of October and it is kind of chilly outside today. And we always start these things
I know. I
just
have this
before
vague
winter.
memory of assembling the pizza oven.
pizza oven last fall.
In the dark,
Yep.
and then some fall evening.
So come on back to see the next one. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.